This series of videos will provide an overview of behavioral treatments for obesity. We'll think about how to work with individuals to change their health behaviors in hopes of improving their weight outcomes. This second video will explain how the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy can be applied to behavioral treatment of obesity. Let's first take a minute to reflect. Think about your personal and professional experiences. Can you think of a time when you were interacting with someone and you thought, this person really needs to change the way they're thinking about this? Cognitive behavioral therapy is all about helping patients change the ways they perceive and react to their experiences. A foundational concept for cognitive behavioral therapy is this ABC chain of events. A represents an activating event, something that happens to an individual. B represents that individual's beliefs, thoughts, attitudes, or assumptions that they have in response to that activating event. C is then the consequences, feelings, emotions, behaviors, or actions that follow the beliefs, thoughts, attitudes, and assumptions that arise in response to that activating event. Sometimes, this ABC process leads to desirable outcomes. For example, an activating event for an individual could be that they gained a few pounds over the holidays. In response to learning this, the individual's beliefs, thoughts, attitudes, and assumptions may be something like, oops, I guess I overdid it. Time to get back on track now that the holidays are over. We would assume this would be a constructive appraisal of the situation. The individual realized they had a little slip in their adherence to a healthy diet and physical activity patterns, and resolved to make positive changes to get back on track with their healthy habits. In response to these beliefs, thoughts, attitudes, and assumptions, that individual's consequences, feelings, emotions, behaviors, and actions would likely be fairly productive, that they could be objective about their situation, cut back on the high energy density foods that they were indulging in over the holidays, and resume their daily workouts now that their life has become a bit more stable with less travel and fewer visitors. Again, this would be a desirable outcome because the consequences of that individual's beliefs, thoughts, attitudes, and assumptions are that they resume their healthy habits. However, sometimes this process leads to less desirable outcomes, and this is our main focus for cognitive behavioral therapy, when this process goes astray and leads to less healthy appraisals of our situations, and consequently, behaviors and coping strategies that are not aligned with our health goals. So we could take the same activating event, an individual gains a few pounds over the holidays, and perhaps a different individual learns of this, and their beliefs, thoughts, attitudes, and assumptions are much more negative and self-deprecating. They may think, I blew it, I have no willpower, I may as well stop trying. This individual has taken this activating event and appraised it to be an end-all be-all to their weight loss efforts, a sign that they're not cut out to adhere to a healthy lifestyle. As you can imagine, an appraisal such as this would likely lead to less desirable consequences, feelings, emotions, behaviors, and actions. That individual may continue to just eat anything and everything and not monitor their diet too closely. They may lose their motivation for exercise because they feel there is no point to it. So the main goal of cognitive behavioral therapy approaches is to try to get more individuals to have patterns that look like this, where they are able to appraise their activating events in ways that lead to healthy outcomes, and less like this, where they're appraising their situations in ways that lead to less healthy outcomes and attitudes. So we have 3 core assumptions of cognitive behavioral therapy that guide approaches to working with patients. The first is that cognitions affect behavior, and this is the B to C part of that chain. That when we appraise our situations in certain ways, that then flavors how we view ourselves, how we view our actions, and the actions that we feel are appropriate and suited to that situation or helping us feel better about what happened. However, a second assumption is that cognitions can be changed. And this is the A to B part of that chain. Everyone has activating events. Some are positive, some are negative, some are neutral. But people react in different ways to the same event. This is due to a number of things, including their personal history and previous interactions or experiences with events like that. But most importantly, how an individual reacts, what they think about an activating event is not set in stone. It can be changed. And with time, an individual can change the way that they're reacting to events so that their reactions are leading to better consequences rather than poor consequences. So then, our third assumption puts all of these ideas together, that cognitive change can create behavior change. So we can harness this ABC model in a way that helps individuals understand how they're reacting to their experiences and how they can change the reactions that are not serving them well. Instead, we can help them develop thought patterns where their reactions are more constructive and better supportive of their health and weight loss goals. So there can be many reasons why an individual's cognitions about their experiences are problematic. In particular, we know that problems arise when we have automatic thoughts that lead to less healthy appraisals, emotions, and health behaviors. These automatic thoughts are reflexive and spontaneous responses to activating events. This means they're not typically logical, but rather much more emotional. They can occur in shorthand words or images, so quick flashes that immediately follow an activating event. They don't arise from reasoning and often don't have a logical sequence. They can also be very hard to turn off because they're automatic, they're reflexive, they're things that we don't even know that we're thinking until the thoughts are in our head. They may also be very hard to articulate, which may make it difficult for a patient to ask for the help they need if they're having a hard time articulating how they're responding to the events in their lives. So let's think through what this might look like in real life and how it could be fixed with cognitive behavioral therapy. Let's say an individual is faced with a potentially stressful situation that most people would generally agree is unpleasant and undesirable. That individual may have certain automatic thoughts that immediately pop into their head as soon as they realize that situation is happening. And if those automatic thoughts are self-deprecating, self-blaming, or making that individual feel bad about the situation, this will then lead to more negative emotions and less healthy behaviors for that individual. So for example, if an individual who's already feeling self-conscious about starting an exercise program at a new gym sees other gym members laughing and pointing at them, their automatic thought might be, oh my gosh, they are making fun of me and how big I am. This is obviously a very uncomfortable thought, especially if you're already feeling self-conscious and like you don't belong in a situation. That individual may become very embarrassed and may avoid that gym altogether. However, with cognitive behavioral therapy, over time this individual could change the automatic thoughts that they have to a stressful situation like this. So they can eventually work towards a place where they're in a situation where they see individuals laughing and pointing, and instead they could have a much more productive thought of, those people sure are having fun, and not think much more about that. This would lead to better outcomes because that individual would feel okay, they wouldn't feel self-conscious at the gym or like they didn't belong there, and they would continue going and adhering to their exercise plan. Often, these automatic thoughts are forms of cognitive distortions, or ways of thinking about the world that aren't necessarily representative of the true situation, of our abilities, or of our strengths or limitations. Let's go through these different types of cognitive distortions so you can better understand what cognitive distortions look like, the different ways that they manifest, and some real-world examples that may resonate with you that you've either experienced or seen in your everyday life or your professional experiences. The first type of cognitive distortion is emotional reasoning. This is when we believe that our feelings are facts, that just because we feel something, we have to act on it to either relieve that feeling or make that feeling go away. A great example of this is a food craving. Many times we feel that if we have a craving for sweets, the only way to relieve that craving is to give in to it, to eat sweets to make it go away, when really a craving is just a feeling. Just because we feel something doesn't mean we have to act on it, and one of the best ways to make a craving go away is to ignore it. The next type of cognitive distortion is catastrophizing. This is when we tend to always think that the worst will happen in any situation. Our mind goes straight to the worst, most likely as a protective mechanism. If we're planning for the worst, that means we're prepared for the worst, and if the worst doesn't happen, then that's a good thing too. But always believing the worst can happen can be very stressful, because then we're always focused and ruminating on the worst outcomes and thinking that that's what's going to happen, which can be a chronic stressor. So an example of catastrophizing would be an individual who feels like they need to strictly stick to their exercise plan every day. That individual might think, if I don't run every day, I will gain weight. I've got to go out and run, rain or shine, healthy or sick, injured or not. This may lead that individual to feel anxious about having to exercise every day, when really it would probably be okay if they took a day off here or there, or let themselves recover when they needed it. Another form of cognitive distortions is all or nothing thinking. This is when we tend to think that things are all good or all bad, and we don't take the time to think about the gray areas of a situation. So an example of all or none thinking is somebody who says, oh, I ate too much at this meal, my diet is blown, and that to them is a signal to go off their diet and to stop trying to lose weight. When instead, a more flexible way of thinking about the situation would probably help the individual to learn from their experience and to stay on their diet to get back on track the next day. So instead of thinking I ate too much, my diet is blown, the individual could better appreciate the gray area of the situation by thinking, it's unfortunate that I ate too much at this meal, but now I know the situation was difficult for me and I can plan ahead for next time. Another form of cognitive distortion is mind reading, when we think that we know what others are thinking. So if an individual who's self-conscious about their body walks into a room and feels like everybody is staring at them and judging them, they're most likely mind reading. It's quite possible that no one in the room even noticed them or is thinking about their body. Another form of cognitive distortion is personalization, when we take excessive responsibility for the things that happen to us. An example of this is an individual who says, I'm fat because I have no willpower. In reality, it's probably much more complex than that. There may be some genetics or family history at play. That individual may be in a really difficult social or physical environment that makes the adoption and maintenance of health behaviors much more challenging for them than it would be for someone else in a more health-promoting culture and environment. So we want to ensure that we are taking enough responsibility to motivate us to change and to be accountable for our actions, but not excessive responsibility that leaves us feeling hopeless and powerless. Our final cognitive distortion is mental filter, when we ignore the positive of our situation and amplify the negative. This is easy to do because we're drawn to the negative as a protective mechanism so that we can understand the negative of a situation and try to address it. An example of a mental filter would be an individual who said, I failed because I only lost 10 pounds this month. I wanted to lose 20. This person is focusing on the fact that they didn't meet their goal, but they're missing the perhaps more important fact that they lost 10 pounds. That's a huge accomplishment. But by ignoring the positive, they're not letting themselves celebrate and enjoy that accomplishment, but rather just focusing on what they didn't accomplish. These automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions often arise from our core beliefs. So as we've discussed, we constantly have activating events in our lives. We're constantly experiencing different things, and we have different automatic thoughts that arise in response to these activating events. Sometimes these are automatic thoughts that help us, make us feel good about ourselves and the world around us and the people we're interacting with. Sometimes these automatic thoughts are not as constructive and make us feel worse about ourselves, the world around us, and the people we're interacting with. These automatic thoughts then lead to certain physiological reactions, feelings, and behaviors, which again can be positive or negative. These automatic thoughts come from somewhere. They develop through our childhood experiences and our previous life events. These lead us to develop underlying assumptions about ourselves and our place in the world, our assumptions about how we relate to others and whether we can trust others to be sources of support, and our core beliefs about ourselves and the world around us. Through this process, we also develop compensatory strategies for dealing with the areas of our lives that we feel difficult or for helping us to achieve our goal. And similar to what we discussed with the ABC chain of events, these childhood experiences and previous life events, the underlying assumptions and core beliefs, and these compensatory strategies can promote or detract from our health. So let's think through an example of when this is not going as well as we would like. Let's say an individual got a disappointing grade on their chemistry exam. This is an activating event for that individual. In response to receiving that grade, their automatic thoughts are negative, self-deprecating. They have the automatic thoughts of, I'm not cut out for chemistry. I'm never going to graduate with grades like these. I'm not as smart as the other students in the class. As you can imagine, these automatic thoughts would lead to a stress response and negative feelings and behaviors. That individual might feel the physiological response of stress, a racing heart, muscle tension. The feelings that go along with this may be feelings of shame, anxiety, or depression. The subsequent behaviors may be ways that that individual desperately tries to make up for their disappointing grade by cheating on the next test or perhaps even changing their major so they don't have to take any more chemistry classes. This chain of events may have come from that individual's childhood experiences and previous life events. Perhaps their parents were very focused on their academic achievement. They had strict standards that emphasized that academic achievement was a measure of worth. That may have led this individual to develop these underlying assumptions and core beliefs that if they don't excel in school, they're a failure, that getting good grades and graduating from college should be their main life goal that they can't deviate from. This may have led this individual to develop compensatory strategies so that their behaviors and their achievements can align with their underlying assumptions and their core beliefs. Perhaps they develop the idea that they need to do whatever it takes to excel in school, even if the strategy is morally questionable or makes it so they avoid their true passion so they can achieve success over enjoyment. So let's summarize some key cognitive behavioral approaches and perspectives, some of which we've covered in the previous slides. Most importantly, cognitive behavioral therapy approaches recognize that we can change our mood states by using cognitive and behavioral strategies. We can identify and modify our automatic thoughts and core beliefs. We can regulate our routines and minimize avoidance so that we are identifying the ways that we appraise the events that happen to us and striving to appraise these events in ways that promote our health and well-being. We can also use empirical approaches to test and challenge our beliefs. We can test our beliefs by challenging thoughts that are not based in evidence. We can reflect on the reactions we are having to our experiences and think about whether our appraisals are really correct or whether perhaps they're due to a biased perspective we have about ourselves or the world around us. We can then change these beliefs by using approaches such as cognitive restructuring, where we're reframing our situations to think of them in a more positive light. Within cognitive behavioral therapy, we work from concrete examples, and this is what makes it such a powerful approach. That instead of thinking about an individual's history and how they may have contributed to who they are today, we really think about what's happening in the here and now, and how the practitioner and the patient can work together through specific situations and challenges. The hope is that by working through these situations and challenges and developing skills such as problem solving and goal setting, that patient can work through that particular situation, but also develop skills that will help them work through similar or related situations in the future. This leads us to our fifth approach and perspective, that we should focus on helping the patient problem solve and develop skills through self-reflection and continued practice. Let's pause here and summarize with some key takeaways. Cognitive behavioral therapy aims to understand how we appraise and react to our life experiences. We also aim to understand how some reactions lead to less healthy feelings, emotions, and behaviors. We also reflect on how our appraisals and reactions can be changed to promote healthier feelings, emotions, and behaviors. When our appraisals and reactions lead to behaviors that promote obesity, we can use cognitive behavioral therapy to change these appraisals and reactions to promote healthier behaviors and healthier outcomes. That's all for this video. Thank you for learning with me.